An afternoon in South Beach, Miami, where the setting sun painted the ocean in hues of crimson, a group of tourists flooded into the Azure Sands Beach Club, carrying an unmistakable air of arrogance. But amid those who sought validation through wealth and status, one man stood silent, observing it all. Joseph White, a masterful server. Can respect be bought with money, or is the truth revealed only through actions? Pay attention to this story and share your thoughts. What would you do in Joseph's place? Leave a comment and don't forget to hit subscribe for more meaningful stories. Joseph White stood amidst the gentle waves of South Beach, the golden glow of the evening sun reflecting off the sign of the Azure Sands Beach Club, where he had worked for years. His crisp white shirt, neatly pressed, and his expert hands had long perfected the art of crafting an atmosphere where everything felt seamless. Despite the noisy crowds and the demands of difficult patrons, he was accustomed to this world. Glasses of sparkling champagne, fleeting conversations drifting over the water, and the scrutinizing glances of the wealthy, who saw him as nothing more than part of the scenery they occupied. Yet in the amber light of sunset, an undeniable tension lingered. The group of tourists entered the club, their smug expressions carrying the weight of entitlement. They didn't see Joseph as a server, but as someone incapable of understanding the luxuries they possessed. Their remarks weren't genuine inquiries, but mere displays of power and arrogance, spoken only to assert dominance. But Joseph didn't react. He had long learned not to let emotions dictate his actions. His calm demeanor, often mistaken for indifference, was, in truth, a quiet strength. He had nothing to prove. He simply smiled, listened, and served with patience, a quality that not everyone possessed. Nothing about that evening would have been noteworthy until the tone of the tourists subtly shifted. As they ordered the most extravagant dishes, they remained unaware of the story hidden behind Joseph's composed smile, the silent battles he had fought over the years. Their words wouldn't change him, but they would leave a mark. Would they ever realize their mistake in treating him as invisible? Would Joseph ever speak up? The answer remained uncertain. But moments like these, they would linger, echoing long after the night had faded. The group of tourists strode into the Azure Sands Beach Club with an air of entitlement, as if everything around them existed solely for their pleasure. The moment the doors swung open, the sound of crashing waves was drowned out by their loud laughter and boisterous voices. Among them, one man stood out, a blonde-haired figure with slicked-back gelled hair and a gleaming gold watch. Logan. He leaned back in his chair with an air of defiance, his arrogant gaze fixed on the server before him, as if Joseph White were nothing more than a fixture in the space, something to be ignored, not acknowledged. Your best drink, and make it quick. Logan smirked, his tone laced with mockery. He didn't even glance at the menu, simply waved his hand dismissively, as if the options were beneath him. Joseph nodded calmly, his face unreadable. He was used to this, the type of people who believed the world revolved around them. To him, they were just another set of guests to serve. Nothing more, nothing less. I doubt you even understand the taste of these drinks, Logan continued, his condescension barely concealed. His words grew sharper, more insulting. Joseph remained silent, but inside something stirred. Tonight felt different. His silence wasn't submission, it was patience, a patience forged from years of working in this world. Across the table, a woman from the group, Madison, glanced at Joseph with an amused smirk. I thought he was just here to serve drinks. The words landed like a slap, but Joseph only smiled. Things would change. They had no idea, but he knew exactly what was happening in this room. The louder Logan became, the less he realized that Joseph was the one in control. What could silence a man who believed he had already won? Would tonight be the night he realized his mistake? As Joseph looked at the faces of the tourists, a chilling realization crept over him. They didn't just see him as a server. They saw him as part of the background, a tool for their amusement, a prop in their display of power and arrogance. The remarks, the sneers, they painted a familiar picture. But tonight, something felt different. Logan leaned in with another smirk. I bet you've never tasted a drink like this in your life. This is probably more your speed, huh? Laughter rippled through the group. Joseph remained still. He could feel every word like a blade against his skin. Had he ever endured this level of humiliation before? Yet instead of reacting, he stayed perfectly composed. This was not the moment to lose control. A thought flickered through his mind. They didn't realize that the real test wasn't for him, it was for them. Joseph smiled, a small, knowing smile. They had no idea who they were dealing with. These taunts didn't anger him. They reminded him of the respect he deserved. He wasn't invisible, and tonight he would prove it. Joseph stepped out from behind the bar, crafting a special cocktail, one that only those with refined taste would truly appreciate. The drink was a masterpiece, expertly blended, subtly complex. Returning to the table, he placed the glass in front of Logan. For the first time that night, Logan hesitated, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "This is what you asked for, isn't it?" Joseph's voice was calm, unwavering. Logan took a sip, a smirk on his lips. But it didn't last. The expression vanished, replaced by genuine surprise. The cocktail was beyond anything he had expected. It was a level of sophistication he didn't understand. Joseph said nothing. He simply smiled. Because this moment, it changed everything. He wasn't the server they thought he was. And tonight, they would have to face that truth. They didn't know how many times he had heard comments like these before. Yet instead of anger or defiance, a faint, unreadable smile formed on Joseph's lips. Not because he found humor in their words, but because he understood something they did not. True strength isn't in reacting. It's in staying composed. Logan smirked again, his voice dripping with mockery. "Didn't expect you to actually serve a decent drink. Thought you only knew how to pour the cheap stuff?" Laughter rippled through the group, but Joseph remained unfazed. He took a slow, steady breath and continued working. Every movement precise, every drink served with a level of craftsmanship that left no room for doubt. He knew what they wanted. They were poking, prodding, waiting, hoping for a crack in his composure, for a moment of weakness. But Joseph gave them nothing. Instead of words, he spoke through his actions. Each time he poured a drink, each time he set a glass down, it was as if he was sending a silent message. Respect isn't something you buy. It's something you give. The energy at the table began to shift. The smug confidence in their eyes flickered, dimming as they slowly realized that their taunts weren't working, especially not on the man standing before them, who continued to serve them with a precision and elegance they hadn't expected. What they thought would rattle Joseph had only made him stronger. When he placed a fresh glass of wine in front of Logan, something in the man's expression changed. No longer smug, but uncertain. They had expected him to be shaken. Instead, they were the ones left unsettled. Joseph didn't say a word. He simply smiled, met Logan's gaze for a brief moment, then turned away, leaving behind a silence heavier than any argument. He had nothing to prove, because he had already won. The group carried on with their loud conversations, the jabs and snide remarks continuing. But Joseph remained steady, unwavering. Logan, the man with the slick-back blonde hair and gleaming watch, smirked again. "Think you could even drink this? Or are you only good for serving it?" Laughter followed. Their voices were a challenge, a test. They wanted to see how far they could push him. But Joseph didn't flinch. He simply smiled and quietly went back to work. His expression never wavered. Every movement, from pouring the wine to placing the glass down, was done with a level of control and patience they couldn't understand. It left them with a question they couldn't answer. Why isn't he reacting? Doesn't he feel the insult? Joseph, trained to remain professional in every situation, knew the truth. Their words didn't matter. What mattered was how he chose to respond. If he let their taunts shake him, they would be in control. But he didn't give them that power. He didn't argue. He didn't fight back. He simply did his job perfectly. Every detail, every drink poured, every motion was done with deliberate precision. A while later, Madison, the woman in the group, turned to Logan, her tone shifting slightly. "Can we do something more fun?" But the tension in the air didn't disappear. Logan hesitated, pressing his lips together. The arrogance on his face faltered. Just for a second. Joseph could see it. The shift in their eyes, the way their laughter had quieted. They didn't understand why they hadn't gotten under his skin. From this moment on, Joseph was no longer invisible to them. He was the man who stood strong in the storm, the one who won without ever speaking a word. And more importantly, he had taught them a lesson, without uttering a single criticism. The ones who had sought to control and humiliate were now the ones sitting in silence, uncertain. Joseph's patience, his unshakable calm, had forced them to look at themselves. Logan, still wearing his smug grin, continued to rant about how terrible the drink was, deliberately emphasizing its supposed lack of quality. Laughter erupted from the group, a challenge hanging in the air. But Joseph didn't flinch. He remained where he was, standing with his tray in hand, his expression unchanged, cold, unwavering. Yet as the mockery reached its peak, a moment of silence fell over the room. The only sound left was the distant crash of waves against the shore. Joseph set the glass down on the table with the precision of a master. He didn't rush to respond. Instead, he simply looked at Logan and the others, his gaze steady, unyielding, but carrying a hint of quiet disappointment. He didn't need to say much, because he understood something they didn't. "You know," Joseph began, his voice low, calm, yet cutting through the silence. "This isn't about money. It's not about what you can afford. It's about whether you actually understand the value of what you have." He glanced toward the carefully crafted drinks on the table, the very thing he had spent years mastering, understanding, and appreciating. The delicate notes, the history behind every bottle, the artistry that couldn't be measured in dollars alone. "You think you know this drink?" Joseph continued, his tone neither aggressive nor defensive, but merely stating a truth. "Sure, you can talk about flavor, but have you ever stopped to really taste it? To understand why it's worth what it is?" A heavy silence settled over the group. Joseph's words had landed like a punch to the gut. For the first time that night, they had no response. Because deep down, they knew they couldn't answer the question. They had never truly understood value, only price. They had failed to see what was right in front of them. Luxury isn't about what you show off. It's about what you understand, what you appreciate. The group sat there, now silent. No more laughter, no more arrogant remarks. Their eyes flicked toward one another, but no one dared to speak. Joseph allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Not a smile of victory, but a smile of understanding. Because tonight, he had shown them something that money could never buy. The moment that changed everything. The tension in the air didn't ease as Joseph turned back to face them. They were still watching him, their expressions shifting, waiting, expecting something. Joseph remained quiet as he walked toward their table, his movements measured, effortless. He placed his hands on the table, pulling out his notebook as if nothing had happened. But then, something no one expected. Joseph spoke. "You know," his voice was calm but carried undeniable weight. "I'm not just a server here. I own this club." Silence. Complete. Unshakable. The laughter stopped. The arrogant grins vanished. Every eye in the room snapped toward him, disbelief rippling across their faces. Logan, the man who had basked in his own superiority all night, froze. His brow furrowed. His confidence cracked. And for the first time that evening, he was speechless. The jokes, the insults, all of it disappeared. The glow of the club's soft lighting reflected in their stunned faces, illuminating a truth they had failed to see. Money and status couldn't buy respect, and true character couldn't be faked. The silence was unbearable. Madison, always the one to break tension, attempted to speak. "Wait, you mean—" She hesitated, her voice unsteady. "You're actually the owner?" Joseph simply smiled. Not to boast, not to humiliate, but as a quiet confirmation. "Yes," he said smoothly. "I built this place. And if you think money alone buys dignity, you've misunderstood everything." They had nothing left to say. Their assumptions had collapsed. The superiority they had clung to was gone. Logan sat motionless, the words failing to come. Madison lowered her gaze, unwilling to meet Joseph's eyes. Drew, the one who had stayed mostly neutral, let out a slow sigh. realizing just how blind they had been. Reality had hit them in a way they hadn't expected. One by one, they stood up. No arrogance, no smugness, just quiet understanding. They left without another word, no longer carrying the same self-importance they had when they arrived. They had learned something tonight. That money wasn't everything. That respect had to be earned, not bought. As Joseph returned to the bar, he smiled once more, as if nothing had happened, because deep down, he knew the truth. Sometimes the greatest lesson isn't spoken aloud, it's felt in silence. A quiet stillness settled over the table as the group of guests rose to their feet. Gone were the smug laughs. Gone were the echoes of mockery that had once filled the air. They walked away slowly. No words, no lingering arrogance. Logan, the man who had always seen himself as the center of attention, now kept his head lowered, his once confident gaze unfocused. Madison, the woman who had always sought to impress, now looked visibly uncomfortable, unable to meet Joseph's eyes. Drew, who had tried to remain neutral throughout the night, now carried an unmistakable weight of guilt in his expression. The silence between them was heavier than their earlier prideful words. Unlike before, they no longer laughed as they passed the bar. Tonight was different. The conversations in the club carried on, other patrons continuing their evening as if nothing had happened. But no one paid attention to this group anymore. Joseph watched them go, not with a sense of victory, because he had never wanted this silence, but he knew that this was the only way they would understand. Respect isn't something you can buy, not with money, not with status. As they reached the exit, they glanced back one last time, not out of defiance, but because of what they had come to realize. Logan's once arrogant stare was gone, replaced by something more subdued. The mockery that had once been so effortless was now impossible. Madison and Drew exchanged a look. No words were needed. They had learned something tonight. The Azure Sands Beach Club, a place they had assumed they could control, was now nothing more than a reminder, a lesson in respect and real value. Joseph exhaled as they disappeared into the night, feeling the shift in the air. He turned back to his work, moving with quiet ease. There was nothing left to say. The night was over, and perhaps they would never forget what they had learned the hard way. The weight of the moment. Joseph stood behind the bar, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. Beyond the club, the waves continued to crash against the shore, undisturbed by the events of the evening. The guests had left, but the change in the atmosphere remained. It was never about winning, never about proving a point. It was about knowing deep within that he had done the right thing. The jeers, the condescension, the disregard, they no longer touched him, because tonight had reminded him of a simple truth. Respect isn't bought with wealth or power. It's earned through patience, integrity, and the way you treat others. The silence lingered, filled only by the rhythmic sound of the waves and the quiet murmurs of other patrons. Joseph allowed himself a small smile, not for recognition, not for validation, but because he had shown them something real. And that was enough. Every day he worked with dedication and precision, pouring his skill and passion into what he did. And that alone, his work, his principles, his quiet strength, was all the motivation he needed. Not everyone understands the value of humility and respect, but Joseph did, and he would never change. No amount of luxury, arrogance, or pretense could alter the person he had become. He had endured the sneers, the dismissive glances, but in the end, he knew the truth. True confidence doesn't come from seeking validation. It comes from understanding your own worth. As the night deepened and the waves whispered against the shore, Joseph felt peace settle within him. Because this quiet certainty, this unwavering dignity, was the real victory. The lesson of Joseph White. Joseph's story is a powerful reminder of respect and dignity. In today's world, people are often judged by money, status, and appearances. But true respect isn't something that can be flaunted. It's something that is earned. It comes from actions, patience, and the sincerity with which we treat others. Joseph proved that no matter the situation, if you hold on to your dignity, if you stay true to your values, And if you refuse to be shaken by the shallow judgments of others, you will earn the respect you deserve. Confidence isn't about seeking recognition. It's about knowing your own worth, regardless of what others may think. And in the end, that is the greatest strength of all.